Hello and welcome back to the port. I'm the Gav Major, and today we are reviewing the changes made to the Russian tech tree destroyers as of the October patch 2020. Now, in the background will be some recordings of the Tier 5 to Tier 7 destroyers that I captured yesterday before I streamed. That's Friday. Hopefully that will keep you entertained while I rattle on through my notes. Now, when I'm looking at these changes, I'm obviously going to be looking at the changes to the fully upgraded destroyer, because at the end of the day, you're either going to be playing the destroyer fully upgraded or you're going to be working towards having that destroyer fully upgraded. So at the end of the day, it's either the end target or what you're playing. So in my mind, that's the most critical changes. And then also, it's always going to be in comparison to the tech tree destroyers only, as per my reviews. And I've broken it down. So I've broken it down into the specific changes to the actual destroyer at the tier, but also then I've got some look at the overall changes. And obviously at the end I will have a conclusion and some of my own opinions at the end. So first of all, we're going to start off with some what I call the overall changes, or the changes that have happened to all of the destroyers, or the tier. No, the Russian destroyers. That's what I mean to say. All the changes that made to the Russian destroyers. So they have decreased the chances for steering gears and engine modules to be critically hit. However, they haven't provided us with any percentages, so the chances have changed, but we don't know by how much. They haven't provided us any kind of way of quantifying this. It's very hard to obviously make an evaluation on this change. However, you cannot disagree. It is a change to the better. Anything like this to any tech tree destroyers is going to be a nice change. So you have to confess it is a change for the best. Now, the damage control party duration has been increased from 5 seconds to 10 seconds, so it lasts longer, meaning that you're going to be more immune to fire and incapacitations for longer when this is activated. So that's going to be quite an interesting one should you be turning away, trying to disengage. Now you've got that 10 seconds of immunity rather than 5, but also if you're in a bit of a knife fight, it gives you 10 seconds of immunity while you're dishing out the pain. Now, I think this could be quite an interesting one if you use the Unstoppable legendary trait on your commanders. The reason being is that the Unstoppable legendary trait, it speeds up the damage control party cooldown time by 50% when in proximity of an enemy ship. So that's quite nice if you are a knife fighter, I have to confess. But also, I'd always highly recommend the Unstoppable legendary trait on your Russian destroyer commanders. The reason being is obviously keeping your engines working on a destroyer like this is going to be quite critical for your survivability. But if you want to choose something else, then be my guest. I'm not going to tell you how to play. Now going on to the Tier 4 Russian destroyer Podovsky, the gun range has been improved from 10.2 kilometers to 11.2 kilometers for both hulls. Now, what you'll note is those values do differ from those provided by Wargaming in the patch notes, and that's something that you're going to have to note all the way through this. I have gone through on the console and updated my spreadsheets, and when I was updating my spreadsheets I noted that the values provided by Wargaming in the patch notes did not match up with the values actually in game. Most of the values that have changed have all been gun ranges, but occasionally I have changed rudder shifts as well, so that's something to note. So if you were just going off the values provided in the patch notes, then FYI, they're not completely correct, and so obviously during this I will try and provide you with the corrected values. So the change in the gun range takes you from being the second longest range to the longest range for a tech tree DD at this tier, so that's quite nice. The rudder shift time has been decreased from 3.2 seconds to 2.9 seconds. So this takes you from the second slowest to being average for the tier. Also, the torpedo speed has been increased from 65 knots to 70 knots, but you still have the fastest torpedoes at the tier. So your torpedoes have just gone from being fastest to fastest, or faster to faster is the best way to put it. Now, the change to torpedo speed I will cover in the conclusion, so I won't go into much more depth in regards to that here. So the Tier 5 Kenavi, the gun range has been improved from 10.6 kilometers to 11.6 kilometers. This takes you from the joint longest range to the longest ranged destroyer, basically, pushing the French into second place. So basically, you've gone from being joint with the French to now pushing the French into second place. Now, the rudder shift time has increased from 4.4 seconds to 3.9 seconds. Now, this means that you've gone from having the slowest rudder shift to the third slowest rudder shift. So, okay, your positioning has changed massively, but what it actually has done is it has put you more in line with the big DDs at this tier. So the big DDs at the tier are obviously the Kenavi, the Guide, and the Japart, or the three Gs, I guess you could say. And it's taken you from being the runaway loser to being closer to the pack. So the differences between the Guide, the Japart, and now the Kenavi are all only about a tenth of a second. However, before you were quite obviously well away in the lead. Obviously, the torpedo speed has increased from 70 knots to 75 knots. You've basically gone from fast torpedoes to faster torpedoes. You still got the fastest torpedoes again. Going on to the Tier 6 Minsk. So the gun range has improved from 10.8 kilometers to 11.8 kilometers. This now takes you from the joint longest range to the longest range again pushing the French into second place. The rudder shift time has decreased from 3.7 seconds to 3.3 seconds. This takes you from being the third slowest rudder shift to being the joint second fastest rudder shift. And it's only 0.4 of a second, but this is actually quite a big change in your positioning at that tier, and where you sit is the best way to put it. So it is, I think that's quite a big change. Torpedo speed has been increased from 65 knots to 70 knots. So again, you go from having fast to faster torpedoes. So still the fastest at the tier. Obviously, conclusion to come. Tier 7 Tashkent. So the gun range has been improved from 10.9 kilometers to 12 kilometers. This takes you from having the second longest range to the longest range. It takes you from being among the pack, I guess you could say, to being clearly in the lead as well. So the gun ranges of the destroyers at Tier 7 are all very similar. All very close together, but you've definitely now gone from being among them to well in the lead by a considerable margin, I guess you could say. The rudder shift time has decreased from 6 seconds to 5.4 seconds. However, you still have the worst rudder shift for the tier, so it's not really. It's a big change in the actual values, but in your actual positioning, it's not massive. But I guess it is bringing you closer in to the pack again, as per. Well, I guess it's bringing you closer in comparison. Now your torpedo speed. Now obviously this is in regards to the actual proper torpedoes at this tier, the actual upgraded torpedoes. So don't get confused with the 4-kilometer torpedoes here. So the torpedo speed has been increased from 55 knots to 60 knots. So you've gone from having the joint slowest torpedoes to having the second slowest torpedoes. However, it takes your torpedoes from being joint shortest detection time to the shortest detection time. By detection time, that's basically how the time that the enemy have to react to your torpedoes when your torpedoes are detected at the torpedo detection range of those torpedoes. So obviously that's where that distance hasn't changed, but obviously the change in speed has reduced that time, and therefore it does mean that when enemies see your torpedoes coming in, they're going to have the least amount of time now to respond to those torpedoes, which I think is quite a nice trait, especially on those long-range torpedoes that you can have with the Tashkent. Being able to stealth torpedo in the Russians is a luxury, and this is actually quite nice. So going on to the conclusion. So the changes are welcome, but they don't change the overall gameplay of these destroyers, but slightly enhance the way that they should be played, is a nice way to put it. So I think with the Russian destroyers, from tier 4 to tier 6, they're not torpedo boats, really. They're like baby cruisers, is a nice way to put it. You're not going to be stealth torpedoing. Your torpedoes are for close in defense and ambush, and the rest of the time you're going to be focusing on your guns. You're going to be using your speed to obviously try and avoid incoming enemy fire, and then you're going to be using your guns to harass the enemy, taking opportune moments in order to take advantage of, say, battleships looking the wrong way or cruisers who aren't quite paying attention, using your high caliber guns to try and seek out citadels on, especially in some of the lower tiers, seeking out citadels on the cruisers, but also using your superior guns at times in order to pick a fight on a weaker DD. When the opportunity presents itself, these aren't the kind of destroyers that are used for rushing in and trying to grab a objective. However, they're quite good at, like saying, taking a position on the flank, doing some spotting, and just keeping a bit of harassment damage going on the enemy. Now, the changes to the torpedo speed from tiers 4 to tier 6 are negligible. You still have the fastest torpedoes, and you have to close to within 4 kilometers in order to use them. At this range, you should be auto killing cruisers and battleships, or auto hitting. There's no if you're that close to something, there's no real excuse for missing it. The only change that this makes, so the change in just torpedo speed, is it's only when you're really versus an enemy DD, when you're entering that kind of knife fight range, and by having those faster torpedoes at that short range, if you are that close to an enemy DD, it does give the enemy DD less time to react to those torpedoes. However, you have to always take into account that more than likely you're going to be counter torpedoed, so it's kind of like swings and roundabouts. You're putting yourself in a dangerous situation, and you're probably gonna get the kill. You're probably going to get the kill before the increase of torpedo speed. Obviously, now this still means you're probably going to get the kill, but you're probably also going to get killed. Is the nice one to put it. Obviously, the improvements in rudder shift does assist your survivability there. However, if you take 2 torpedoes from most nations, that's probably going to be the end of your game at tiers 4 to tier 6. So, and also, I guess quite a lot of DDs out there, or people who've been playing the game for a while, know that the Russians have only 4-kilometer torpedoes. I know that when I play my British DDs, if I see a Russian destroyer, I just make sure that I don't enter that range. Obviously, situations do occur, and you do end up surprised. It'd be like appearing next to each other at 4 kilometers range, and you go, "Oh, okay, right, I know what's going to go on down here." But in reality, I think the change of the speed, I mean, it's nice, but it's not really going to have a massive impact. Now, the torpedo speed buff at tier 7, personally, I think it wasn't really needed. I mean, on the 4-kilometer torpedoes of the Tashkent, I'm sure it's reasonable because it's kind of following that concept of assisting your knife fighting. But when you have those longer range torpedoes of the Tashkent, the change in speed, I don't think it was necessary. The Tashkent is actually already a very good destroyer once fully upgraded in comparison for the tier. She is the gem at the end of the line. This is why when I talk about Russian ships, I don't include the Tashkent, because she's so different to the rest of the tech tree that you can't just say, "Oh, but the Russian destroyers are good," and then go, "Oh, but I'm really just talking about one of them." I mean, in general, I'd say the Russian destroyers are quite poor, except the Tashkent. And Tashkent really is the gem at the end of the tree. She's really worth the grind. I'm gonna be honest, guys and gals. Now, the changes to the rudder shift, they are nice. They do have the biggest impacts on the Russian destroyers at tiers 4 and tier 6, with the changes at tier 5 and tier 7 just simply bringing you more in line with the other destroyers of the tech tree, whereas I guess at tier 4 and tier 6, the changes are having quite a big impact. They're rearranging your position within the pack quite nicely. So, and I think the Minsk could probably do with a little bit of love, to be totally honest. The increase in the gun range aids their playstyle of being harassing destroyers, as I was saying earlier, using their gun range to stay just in touching distance of the enemy, but using their speed or smoke to disengage. Obviously, the changes in the damage control party also assist there. If you're harassing from a distance and suddenly come under fire, you're going to want to maybe use that damage control party as you're escaping if you're coming under fire from cruisers and being set off light and things like that. So, will the changes change people's opinion, and will it change how often these destroyers are played? Personally, I don't think so. I mean, if you've enjoyed playing these before, then you're going to continue to enjoy playing them. However, if you did not like them before, these changes are negligible. Really, I think what they might have done is maybe made the experience slightly more enjoyable as you're grinding the tech tree, but I think there's still going to be a love them or hate them. They aren't that flexible, and if you just don't like the playstyle, it's just the glove's just not going to fit at the end of the day. So I don't see the numbers of Russian destroyers appearing in matches of standard or ranked really changing. And personally, I think if they really want to actually get people to play this tech tree a little bit more, I'd probably say maybe look at the Minsk and maybe offer her a torpedo module, which at least increases her torpedo range maybe to about 6 kilometers, maybe a bit more. I think the Minsk could just do with a little bit more touch and distance with her torpedoes, considering that her matchmaking is going to put her sometimes up against tier 7s and the amount of radar there. Sometimes I find when I'm playing the Minsk, it's kind of like you do your bit, and then once you've done that, that's pretty much your game. Once you've lost too much HP in the Minsk, you just can't continue the fight because you're never going to get in torpedo range of anything, and you can't really you can't really pop off some shots without being shot at unless you have a smoke screen. And usually later in the game, you're the one doing the spotting. There's not much spotting being done by anyone else. I mean, the Minsker does make a very good spotting destroyer, so you will get a lot of spotting damage that way. But if you enjoy sailing around and just looking at the enemy, then you can do that in any DD. You don't specifically need to play the Minsk. Whereas if you want to play and actually hurt the enemy, the Minsk obviously kind of falls short there. But that's just my little summary of her at the end of the day. Well, if you've liked this wrap up of the changes to the Russian tech tree destroyers, feel free to give the video a thumbs up. I do these videos occasionally, and I hope you do enjoy them. If you have enjoyed it, feel free to subscribe, and if you are already a subscriber, I'd like to say thank you very much, guys. If you have any of your own game captures, whether they're good or bad, feel free to send them in to our email address. Obviously, so I do two types of community video. I do amateur reports. Amateur reports is basically me supplying a commentary to a gameplay, usually a very good gameplay, or something where something's been spotlighted done quite well. Other times I do sea trials. Now sea trials will be any gameplay. I will accept a good gameplay where I then do add a commentary and a tactical overlay highlighting what the player is doing well, and it could be terrible gameplay. If you've had an absolutely horrendous game and you're sat there thinking, what the hell happened? What could I have done to change it? Feel free to send those in, because that's the whole point in sea trials. Sea trials, I add tactical overlays onto it, and if you want assistance, then I'm more than happy to try and provide it in showing what would I have done to change it, what would I have done to like try and survive longer, get a bit more done, what would I have done basically. And also if you want to support the channel on Patreon, then you can always do so. The link to Patreon is down in the description, and on Patreon you'll find the Patreon trailer where it will highlight some of the benefits of being a Patreon. This channel is non-monetized, so it's all run, financed basically by myself and the patrons. Well, until next time, I'm the Galloping Major, and back to the port.